Welcome to the Fundamental Baptist Podcast. There are many types of Baptists, but being a Baptist once meant that you were a fundamentalist. Over the years, many Baptists have strayed from the fundamentals and thus attack those who remain true to the faith. This podcast will address the issues surrounding what it means to be a fundamental Baptist.
Somebody said, Brother House, fundamentalists are changing, aren't they? No, fundamentalists don't change. Folks quit being fundamentalists. God says when the troubles come, He said fight. You can't fight. He said withstand. You can't withstand. He said stand. What does it mean to stand? He said don't change. What? Don't change what? Number one, don't change what you believe.
Here we will reason concerning the Scriptures about the doctrines we hold dear. We believe in souls being saved, lives being changed, and Bible doctrines being strengthened by the Word of God. We believe in the local church, soul winning, missions, and everything taught in the King James Bible.
I thank God tonight for this wonderful Bible. You know, I thank God it's a perfect book, and I love the Bible. Doesn't need any addition, no correction, nothing taken from it. Thank God tonight for the Holy Bible. I like it just like it is.
We are not ashamed of being fundamental Baptists, and we want to encourage others to remain true to the Bible, their Baptist heritage, and to not change what they have been given.
You just stick with the book. You can't beat this book. Why does every generation feel that we got to change it just a little bit because our daddy did it like this and our granddaddy did it like that, and let's change it just a little bit? You change it, and things that are different are not the same. The same commit thou to faithful men.
Thank you for joining us in our discussion of what it means to be a fundamental Baptist.
Hello and welcome, David Baker. Welcome to two podcasts today. This is the Wisdom for Life podcast and the Fundamental Baptist podcast. So I run a couple different podcasts. The Wisdom for Life is more for family and teaching on marriage and children and child rearing. And so then the other one is more for preachers and concerning fundamental Baptists. So, but my guest today fits for both of those, and we have a very special guest. We have today my dad, Raymond Cecil Baker, goes by Cecil. Dad, welcome. How are you doing?
Doing okay.
He's like, I don't know what you've got me set up on, because when I asked him about doing this, he didn't know if he wanted to do it or not. So I don't think he knows how he's doing. So Dad, how old are you?
86 and will be 87 August 16th.
August 16th will be 87. So what would that make your birthday be when you were born?
August 16, 1937.
1937. That sounds like a long time ago. So wonderful. So you've tried to die on us a few times. You look healthy. You look like you're doing good. How's your health doing, and what have you been through? I know we could go into hours long to go into everything you've been through, but those couple big things, you were almost not here a couple times. What happened?
My heart started having problem, and I was in Murray Regional, and they even shocked me and brought me back. And that was, I guess, the first time that I had the problem. But later on, when I was in Iowa, my heart went bad on me again, and I had to be shocked. And that was real strange. They said I wouldn't feel anything, which I didn't, but I felt that it was a concrete block falling right on my chest, and it did twice, and that was the way it felt when that happened.
Now, you also have asbestos lung.
Yes.
How long have you had that?
Since probably 1984, 5.
Wow. Asbestos from working at DuPont and
Yes.
health issues and then medications and all the things that it's brought. So we're glad that you're still here with us. Years ago, we had a final Christmas, and Dad couldn't sleep in a bed. He had to be in a chair, and we said goodbye, and we knew that would be our last Christmas. But thank God for a Dr. Shoemaker and God who was able to help find out what the problems were and help you. One time the doctors almost killed him. They had so much medicine that he was on, and he knew he wasn't doing well and went to a doctor, and the doctor looked at everything you were on and checked your vitals and said, go to the hospital, and almost died then. And then one time they gave us some medicine that busted your colon or your small intestine, and all the poison ran out through the body. Is that right? Something like that?
I have only one kidney, and I didn't know I had it. Didn't feel anything.
Had cancer of the kidney, and they had to take a kidney.
The X-ray showed up, and they took the kidney out, and that's been almost 3 years.
Yeah. So we're glad that you're here. So I'm going to go through some things with his life and ask him some questions. There's some really interesting things there. Books could be written when you have almost 87 years, but grew up on a farm, working hard. So what kind of tractor did you have when you were a boy?
I didn't have one when I was a boy.
Oh, really? What did you use to plow the fields?
A mule.
A mule named?
Old Eller was the mule.
Old Eller, plowed with a mule.
Yes.
All right. And then you had a big milking machine, right, that milked the cows in the morning? Is that what you had?
No, I had hand milking.
How many cows did you have to milk before school and after school every day?
Anywhere between 12 and 18, I would say.
Between 12 and 18 cows every morning before school. What time did you have to get out there for them?
Dad would get me up at 5 o'clock, and I was in a bed where it had a window that had a screen on it, and his hard nails, he would just scratch by that screen and get up.
You better be up.
And Dad had to help me milk the milk cows, and
wow.
I would milk as many as he did, and then I had to walk them over the field to another, get ready to school and
take off. A little bit different the way people grew up back then, for sure. So then you went in the Army, and I think you were 17. And what was the special day? At 17, you couldn't sign up for yourself, so you had to get special permission. What day did you get this special permission to go into the Army on?
Well, it was 1954 to start with. I wanted to go in the Army because I wanted to get away out of the farm. And I got the papers, Dad and Mother, to sign them. And Daddy didn't even go to Mother and say anything to her about that. And he said, I'm not going to sign it, but if you are still inclined to go into the Army, you'll still be 17 years old, and I hope you'll still stay with me, but I was still going to want to go in the Army, and I had.
Wasn't there Mother's Day?
It just happened to be a Mother's Day, and I took the papers in to Dad, and then I took it to Mother, and she wouldn't sign it, and she was crying, and I came back out and said, Dad, she won't sign the papers. He said, give it to me. He came back out no more than 5 minutes, and it was her signature, and that was Mother's Day.
That was Mother's Day, yeah. It's amazing those days sometimes we don't think about. So you went in the Army, and you met a friend there, but I want to know, when did you get saved? When did you accept Jesus Christ as your Savior? I was 1950 on July the 13th or 15th. And that was at Goshen Methodist Church. And I never had got into anything or that I felt bad about, but there was some words that I could fuss at a cow about. And I decided right then, that day, when I went forward in the church, and that was the only thing that I really remember, but I never said another word, whether I was in church, Army, or until this day. Wow. So those cows got some words.
Yes.
And by the way, if you ever work with old cows, and it can be very frustrating. So then you went in the Army, and a lot of the guys were carousing and womanizing and drinking and things. You and one guy we're not. Tell me about him and the significance of this guy.
Well, I went through basic training in Camp Chaffee, Arkansas, and then next training was to go to Fort Devens, Massachusetts. And it wasn't long till I got smart and said, if I went to the church on post, that I didn't have to do some jobs that I didn't want to do. I didn't have to cut potatoes, and I didn't pick up garbage, and then I met a young man there. He was a little older than I was, and his name was Dave Clark. And he and I became buddies. And then there was another one that was Sidney Hill, and he was from Millbury, Alabama. And we didn't know what we were getting into. We had to take a battery of tests, and it was also a strange one. When I got home from basic training, I had people saying, "Cecil, what have you got into?" And I didn't know. And school teacher said, I didn't think that you were a bad boy. And then even the sheriff that I knew said, FBI has been around here checking you out. And so then when I finally got to Fort Devens and took a battery of tests, I was put into the, I better not say too much, but Army Security Agency was what I was into. But I had a real nice major that I worked with too, and the things that I did was very good. He was never mean or hateful or anything. There was one thing that he said I had to do, and that was, you're going to at least get into some kind of recreation. And he started asking, what do you want to run? What do you want to fight? What do you want to? And I didn't like any of those, but I said, well, I can run. And I got on the team for 1st Army, and when we had the runoff, I came in 3rd. You only get one thing if you get one 1st or 2nd. So I didn't get recognition, but that was the one thing that I did.
That's a red track.
The other thing, Dave and Sidney and I were going to the GI Fellowship on post. And then we would go to another night and we would practice for the choir. And then we'd go to church on Sunday. So we were real soldiers. Like, it was almost like Army, but not really. And it was one time that there was a lady from about 5 miles away came to play organ and piano, and she said, would any of you soldiers like to go off post to my church? And we asked her where it was and what kind of church it was, and I said yes. And Dave went with me, but Sidney didn't want to go to start off with. And when I got there, I found something that was different. And I knew that from the Methodist church to a chapel on post and a Methodist church in town, this was something else. And it was the Baptist church. And at that time, I had to realize, I don't know that I was really saved, but at that time, I did get saved, and I even got baptized in the church that was there. And I don't know where you want me to stop, but there was I was friendly. I was.
Well, before we get to that, I wanted to ask. So I remember with Dave Clark helping you with doctrine, and you grew up Methodist and good moral person. Then you realize, okay, a lot of different churches teach a lot of different things. You went to different churches to find out what they believe. So starting off with the Bible, reading it, okay, I think I have a good idea of what it teaches. Now let me find a church that lines up with the Bible,
yes.
right? And,
yes.
and what did you go through, and catechism and confirmation? What did you look out there and see, and how did you end up at a Baptist church?
Well, there was a real strange one. There was a guy by the name of Les Belkin, and he was dating a girl in a distant town, maybe 12 miles, and he wanted me to take him to see this girl. I had a car by that time, and when I saw that family had something that I was odd of, and it ended up that Les Belkin wanted to go into Catholic catechism, and he wanted me to go with him. Well, I didn't have anything to do, so I went through Catholic catechism. It was probably 3 or 4 months.
Wow.
And he went on and took the
confirmation.
Yes, and I would not. But I'd already been to the Baptist enough that I knew that Catholic was not what I wanted.
Right.
So I did not.
So what a great way. Start with the Bible, find out what the Bible teaches, and then find a church that lines up with the Bible. So now you're at a church, you're at a Baptist church, and you happen to see an attractive girl, or a friend sees a girl. Tell us about this this girl and this date story.
Well, as I remember, I had a yellow Plymouth convertible, and
1952?
52.
52, yellow Plymouth convertible.
Yes. And there were opportunities for me to date, and every time on Sunday I would be going to one of the girls' meals, and then at night, and Baptist, whatever they called it, Baptist fellowship. And I was having fun, and there was a guy by the name of Carl Lindsay, and he came in one night, and I was already in bed, and he came up beside the bunk. I was on the top one, and he was shaking me and say, "Ray, Ray," because I had to be Ray in the Army with Raymond.
First name, Raymond.
Yeah.
He was Ray. So.
And he said, "What's wrong? Did you see that pretty girl there tonight?" And I said, "There was no pretty girl there last night." He said, "Yeah, she was. She was on the back seat and on the back row." And I said, "She's been there all this time, but there's been some old guy with her." And he said, "Well, there was nobody with her." And I said, "Well, so what?" He said, "She is pretty." And he said, "I want to make a deal with you. If I can get a date with her, and you get a date with somebody else, then we can double date." And I said, "I don't think that'll work." And we made a deal right then. I said, I will get her first, or you get her first, and then we'll get the other one and we will double date. Well, after the preaching service next Sunday, she was in the little entryway, and I got to her before Carl Lindsay did. And it was fun for me, but when I asked her if she went to Baptist Youth Fellowship, and she said, no, my dad's a deacon, but he doesn't come that early at night. And I said, would you like to go? She said, maybe. And I said, well, could I come and get you? And she started trying to give me directions. That woman still cannot give directions. So I finally said, that's not going to work. I said, why don't I just take you home now, and then I'll know how to get back to it. Of course, that was a little tricky, too. So anyway, we dated. I brought her to Baptist Youth Fellowship.
Now wait, at the house, when you picked her up and she got into the car, there was something there that she saw and wondered about? What was that? This flag? The flag between the seats when you picked her up?
Yeah, that was in that yellow Plymouth convertible. I had a small rebel flag on a stick, and I put the stick between me and her. And
First date, okay?
She didn't say anything, and I had enough of it, so I said, I guess you want to know what this flag's for, don't you? Well, I was wondering. And I said, well, I just want you to know that nothing can ever become of this relationship because I talk Southern and you don't. And that way we'll never get married and have children.
But if I remember right, you said if we got married and had kids, they would talk
half and half.
Half and half, okay? So first date with this girl, corny Confederate flag in the middle. And so is that the last you saw of her, or how many years have you guys been married now?
We dated for 2 years with me in the Army, and she graduated on graduated on Friday, and we got married on Saturday. And
been married how many years now?
66 years.
Been married
will be
66
this week.
years. So the kids don't talk half and half. Dad got her out of Massachusetts down to Tennessee. So great story. So I want to fast forward. So you guys ended up getting married, eventually moving to Tennessee and bought a farm and went to church. You guys helped start a church, Northside Baptist Church in Columbia, charter members. Dad ended up being chairman of the deacons there, and Mom was a Sunday school teacher. And then Dad worked for DuPont, and they closed, and we got moved to Iowa. And so I was 12 at the time. My sister would have been 14. My younger brothers would have been 10 and 6, I guess. And so we needed to find a church. So in Tennessee, there was some decent Southern Baptist church, believe the Bible and try to stand for what's right. What happened trying to find a church in Iowa?
It turned out to be that in Columbia was a Southern Baptist. We got to Iowa and it was Northern Baptist. And it was altogether wrong. And I didn't stay there very long. I'd say 2 months before I brought the family up. And we stayed there for a little while, and then I said, we've got to find another church. Well, Dave and Donna was a big help because they had a group that would meet after school, and they really wanted to go to the whatever Baptist church that was. But anyway, we started going to that Baptist church, And we stayed for several years.
So you never joined that church because there were some doctrinal things that you said, hey, this is liberal, and it was Northern Baptist, but Northern Baptist changed their name to American Baptist later, so it was technically an American Baptist denomination church. So you never joined because of why?
I knew it wasn't what it should be, but taking care of our youth and our children, and I thought were getting in the right place. So they took me in. I was the choir director. I was Sunday school teacher, and I never did go to be a deacon, but I could go to the meeting. And you want to tell about your...
Well, I know one thing, the church tried to, and you weren't officially a member, but they were trying to change the church constitution.
Yes.
And trying to say that the Bible was not inerrant and infallible.
Right.
And so Dad was there, wasn't technically a member, wasn't supposed to speak, but you requested, and they let you speak. What happened there?
James Jenkins was the
moderator,
chief, whatever he was.
Right.
And they were going to have a meeting. And they said what they were going to do was, because the pastor was going to want to change the
Constitution.
Yeah, Constitution. And I asked Jim what he was going to be wanting to change. And he said he is going to ask us to say that what are those words?
Inerrant, infallible.
And I asked him if I could come to the meeting. And they talked about it with the pastor not there. And finally I said, Jim, I know that I'm not a deacon, but can I have the floor? And he said, yes. And when I told him that, infallible and inerrant, coming around the corner was the preacher. And he was mad. And he said, if you do not adopt or take that out of the Constitution, that he would be leaving. And he left in about a month.
Wow.
And now they got another name, and it's a good church.
So then one of your boys got caught drinking, me, and you had tried to help me, and so one of the things I had to do, you made me go talk to the preacher. And so I had to go talk to the preacher. I think this was a different preacher then. And I came home and I said, well, the preacher, you said, well, how'd it go? He said, good. He agrees with me. He didn't see anything wrong with social drinking either. How did your heart drop? What did you think then when the preacher should be backing you up and supporting biblical principles and teenagers, even against the law, to do that? What did you think after that?
I told Marilyn, my wife, we were leaving this church, and I'm going to find a church that is right. But she was still teaching Sunday school, and Dan was into some things that he shouldn't be into, and Darrell was just a kid. But I think I went to at least 6 or 7 churches in town, and finally we ended up going to Faith Bible Church. And I went one Sunday. Then that Wednesday I talked to the pastor, and everything was perfectly right scripturally. And I came home and said, we are leaving church. We are going to Faith Baptist Church. Donna, Dave, and Darrell didn't care. They were upset, but I was still in charge.
So at this time, there's a little break between those stories. When I got caught drinking, it was about a year after I moved out of the house and told my parents I wouldn't live by their rules and moved out of the house. That was the final straw that you said, I'm finding a new church. And so you found it. Donna was already moved out. I had moved out. It was just Dan and Darrell that were there. And they were not happy. And Dad said, I don't care. We're moving. And so what happened to the boys after they, it took a while, but after they were in the church, what happened?
Well, it was rather strange. We went to the church, and then within 2 or 3 weeks, the preacher resigned, and we didn't have a pastor. So we had to start looking for a pastor, and we ended up getting, I wish I could remember,
John Lang.
John Lang, and he was from...
Where did he go to Bible college at?
At Hammond Baptist Church.
Hiles Anderson College.
Yes.
So...
And this was the first pastor that he had some problems, but he still preached, and everything went well. And then there was a young man that came out of the Air Force, and he was, I don't know why he was settling there, but he was. And he ended up taking over the youth. And Dan was doing well, and Darrell didn't care. But
his name was Gary Biggs.
Yes.
And if I remember the story right, the youngest brother, Darrell, got saved not long after being at the church. He was still young and heart was soft. Dan was already rebellious, 16, 17, didn't want any of it. And Gary Biggs and Mom and Dad praying, and Gary Biggs got with Dan and answered his questions, and Dan got saved and ended up starting to preach and going to Bible college and becoming a youth pastor for Gary Biggs at First Baptist Church in Mediapolis, Iowa for years. And now my brother Dan pastors that church and has been there for a couple decades.
Yeah,
so.
Several years.
So
when it was rather sneaky that we were going out to bowl. Donna and a friend was with us, and we asked Dan if he was going. He said, no. That was normally his way of talking. And I said, what are you going to do? I'm going to stay here. I said, okay. And then I called Brother Biggs and said, tonight is the night. If you can come over, Dan's going to be here by himself.
Set up.
When I was dealing with him almost every night. And I left the Bible on the kitchen table, dining room, and I had the list of scriptures for him to read while we were gone. And we left, and when we got home, Dan wasn't there. But on the scripture I said, Dan, you need a Savior. And then when we got back, Dan wasn't there, but he wrote on that same slip, and I wish I still had it. He said, I have a Savior.
Yeah, that's big. And he had went with Gary Biggs and some activity, and it was fine. It's amazing what God did. That little church there turned our family around. My two brothers weren't even saved. They got saved. And Sister Donna ended up getting in a better church because of that. And then they started praying for me, this rebellious son in the Army, away from God. And Dad, in high school, I got busy with life and sports and girls and friends and work. And Dad was busy with his work, and we had drifted apart. And I don't know if Dad did this on purpose, but he, in my mind, looking back, purposely wanted to restore a relationship with his son. And I would get these long letters in the Army, in Korea, written single space, long legal sheets, front and back. I still have them, by the way. And I'll read them every once in a while. But just trying to restore a relationship with a son when you've lost it. And then a missionary was coming to the church there, and his name was Joe Esposito. And a lot of times they have missionaries. Anybody have an extra room? You could keep the missionary. My parents had an extra room. I was gone. So Joe Esposito and his wife stayed in my old room, and they were talking to him about me. And they said, oh, we know of a good church at Fort Bragg. We'll have them go visit. And so because of that church that Dad found, I think Mrs. Esposito wrote the letter to the church, and they had Fred Giles, in charge of the Patriots Ministry, come and visit me, invite me to church. And at that church, the first independent fundamental Baptist King James Bible church I was ever in. And I got into an argument with the Sunday school teacher about the King James Bible because I had my NIV. But little by little, God changed me. Ended up getting called to preach there, and surrendered a few weeks after leaving to go to Bible college. But what an amazing thing. By the way, David Clock, the guy that helped my dad with some doctrine, was Baptist, and that's my namesake, the guy that my dad mentioned in the Army, David Clock. And so now you guys retired from DuPont, moved back to the farm in Tennessee. And so how many years now have I been your pastor? 28? How many years? When did you move back? When did you retire?
1995.
1995. So that means I've been your pastor probably 29 years. So could you imagine that? I jokingly say, yep, they yelled at me when I was growing up, and now every Sunday I can yell back at them. So we joke about that. But it's been a blessing. It's been my honor to get to pastor my mom and dad. Except when you go to tell an illustration, and it's an illustration that's bad from life, and then you look and realize, uh-oh, my parents don't know that story. And so I look at my parents like, you haven't heard that one, have you? And they both shake their head. Okay, it's too late now. So many things they found out that they didn't want to know. But what a blessing it's been. Today is Father's Day, we're recording this on. Any advice you would give to fathers out there with wayward children? Any advice you'd give in leading, guiding, finding the right kind of church? That church just literally turned our family upside down for good because of that. And the other church, literally, the youth director's husband bought alcohol, brought it to the church, gave it to the teenagers at our youth activity. The night got worse from there. And of course, my parents didn't know about that. But when you're with people that don't believe the Bible is inerrant and infallible, and they make up their own rules and they do what they want to do. Every man does that which is right in his own eyes when we don't have an authority, and that's what's there. And I've seen so many people leave biblical sound doctrine truth and go back to the things of the world that I came out of, and they think they're doing something good, and sadly they're going to realize way later with their children what a bad mistake that was. But any advice you would give to parents out there who have you're on the other end of this now, any advice you'd give to them?
Know what's going on with your children.
Yeah.
The one that I really blew my top on it was when you all were having a party, I guess, and I was bringing food like some of the other parents were, and I just walked by and it was a movie on, and it was just a flash, but it was on a picture with a woman that did not have a top on. And I got that, I can't even think of his name, but I got him and I said, you take that out or I'm going to throw it out. And he took it out.
Yeah. That's great advice, boy, to know what's going on with your children, because so many times you were clueless. You thought, okay, they're at church with good people, doing good things, and it wasn't. Years later, and we really wonder, because I know when you moved to Iowa, you tried to find a good church. I mean, there was one Southern Baptist church. You went there a lot to check it out. It was dead, didn't have any people or anything growing. We ended up in the American Baptist Church. We tried Bible churches. I remember going to the Assembly of God Church a few times because there was some life there, and you didn't believe their doctrine. But trying to find a good church, I never found one. Years later, after I'd started to preach, I was driving down one of the streets, and I saw this little building, and it said Independent, I don't remember the name, Grace Baptist or something, but it was Independent, Fundamental, Premillennial Baptist Church, and it looked like it'd been there for a while. And I went home and talked to Mom and Dad. I was like, hey, when did they put this church there? And Mom said, oh, that church has been there since we moved here. It's like, why didn't we ever go to visit that church? I wonder if that's where God had wanted us to go. Do you remember what she said, why you guys didn't visit that church?
I don't know.
She said, you ready for this? The welcome wagon lady.
The what?
The welcome wagon lady.
Oh, yeah.
Had, when she came to pass out gifts and welcoming to the community, they had asked about that church, and they said, oh, that's a weird church. They've got weird people. You don't want to go there. And so we never even visited that. I wonder, boy, how life would have been different if we'd have found that church. But they were the weird church. So it's amazing how many people don't want to be peculiar. They don't want to be different. But to be a true Bible Christian, I don't mean you don't, shower and comb your hair, but there should be some things that are different. We should be different than the world. So interesting to look back and see in God's grace and turning all that around. And I am so thankful for a mom and dad that did not give up, that did not just say, oh, well, he's gone. They kept on praying and praying. And at the time, they're trying to reach people there locally. And every time they would say, okay, God, send someone to reach my boy. Because I wouldn't listen to them at the time, but God could send somebody else to reach me. And God did. So any final words? I think we're getting ready to go eat some lunch on Father's Day. Any final thoughts? Anything I didn't ask you that you think would be helpful?
There was one thing that I thought of when you were out and in the Army, and even when you were in high school, we would go to bed. And I was working 12-hour shifts most of the time, and I needed my rest. But all of a sudden I'd feel the bed shaking, and your mother was crying. And I just got up, went and was on the top upstairs. And I sat on the steps praying. And sometimes I'd just lay down on the floor and stay there till I had to get up. But yes, the Lord got to you with other people. And it's been wonderful to have you as our pastor. And with Dan serving the Lord and Daryl now preaching to some of the people, men, and it's just great.
Amen. It is a blessing. I wish everyone could have that, where family gets to serve the Lord together and make a difference. Rough days, rough times. And Mom would be weeping so bad and shaking the bed, Dad couldn't sleep. And Mom blamed Dad for being too strict, and Dad blamed Mom for being too liberal. And they both needed to be a lot stricter with me. I needed that guidance. It's so funny. I'm a rebel. No one's going to tell me what to do. I'll do what I want to do. I'll show you. I'll join the Army and be a paratrooper. Not a lot of thinking there. So many times those rebels are really looking for structure and someone to tell them what's right and what to do. And so many of them end up going into the military where someone's going to make them do what they know they're supposed to do. But what a great thing for God's grace to turn all that around and to get to serve the Lord. And a lot of people will be in heaven because of that. So Appreciate it. Thank you so much for being willing to let me interview you. When I asked him today, he just looked the look on his face like, oh no. So I told him I didn't think it'd be too painful. So thanks, Dad, for love and prayers and for all the years of getting to serve God. And now it's a blessing because my children are very close to you, and now my grandchildren are getting to be close to you. Yeah. And it's just a beautiful, wonderful thing to serve God. And I always say serving God is awesome. Serving God with family, there's just nothing better on this earth than that. So, Dad, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Fundamental Baptist Podcast. If you have any questions, you can email us at thefundamentalbaptistpodcast@gmail.com.